All right, guys, we're on page 1024. We're starting a new Parsha. So I'm going to be here today and tomorrow. I'm not going to be here on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I'm not going to be here after tomorrow. Tomorrow I'm not going to be giving shir. So Rabbi, what's his name? Rabbi Wakshel has, he's going to be arranging something. Anyway, you know the story? The guy says, David, you love this. The guy says, my wife and I can't agree on our vacation plans. I want to go to Hawaii, and she wants to come with. So the reason I tell you that is because my wife and daughter went away. I sent them away for vacation. It was the three people at vacation. They went away to a hotel for 3 days, and I'm staying home alone. Yeah. Three for the price of two. That's exactly what I told somebody this morning. Anyway, all right. So we're on the beginning of page 1024. Shoftim v'shotrim. Judges and enforcers. On modern Hebrew, a shoter is a policeman. Top of page 1024. A shoter in modern Hebrew is a policeman. And really here it means an enforcer. You know, we always think of a shoter has got to have a blue uniform and a whistle. Here it's the guy, we don't know how they dress. These are the guys who enforce the law when the judges in court, in a Jewish court, would judge, so they have to have enforcers. The Medrash says even Dovid HaMelech, King David, who ruled the Jewish people, but he had Yoav, who was the head general. He was the Secretary of Defense. He was the what's it called? The top general in the army. He enforced the law. You have to have an enforcer. So he says, Shoftim v'shotrim titan l'cha v'chol she'arecha. You should have judges in all of your gates. Asher Hashem Elokecha nosein l'chol yishvotecha, which God gives you for your tribes. V'shoftu es ha'am mishpat tzedek. They should judge the people justly. Now, the first thing over here is that the Torah is very, very practical. The Torah is a very practical system of living. Besides all the depth, it's very, very practical. That means a society cannot function without law and order. And the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says you should daven for the welfare of the ruling government, wherever you are, because without a central government, people would swallow each other up alive. And that's what happens every time there's lawlessness. Every time there's a situation of lawlessness, whether or not it is a blackout in the United States where people start looting, or whether it's not leftists protesting in Israel where there's no law, there's no accountability, that's the situation right now. The leftists, there's very little accountability. They've done things where they've injured people, they've broken, they've vandalized, they've burned things, and there's no accountability. So you get to do whatever you want. There's got to be in every system, and that's one of the Noachide laws. Noachides only have to keep 7 laws. 6 of them are prohibitions. They're not allowed to worship idols, not allowed to murder, they're not allowed to commit adultery, they're not allowed to curse God, they're not allowed to rip the limbs off of living creatures, and they're not allowed to steal. All very basic human behavior. There's only one positive command for Noachides, which is to set up a system of courts. That's the only positive, because you can't have a society without law and order. You got to have that basic law and order. That's the ABCs of life. You can't without law and order. People, where you go to Venezuela today, Venezuela is absolutely up for grabs right now because there's no law and order. There's no central government strength over there. So it's all people run around and do whatever they want. So the first thing the Torah says is you have to set up a system of courts. Now there are 3 types of courts in Torah law. There's the Sanhedrin of 71, that's the great Sanhedrin that sat on the Temple Mount. And then every city that had a certain number of members in the city, a certain population level, had to have a court of 23. And a court of 23 was capable of sentencing people to death, capital punishment, capital and certainly corporal punishment. And then there are courts of 3 which judge monetary law, where you have 3 judges sit, and in case of there's some sort of litigation, 2 people, that's the most common type of litigation, so there are courts of 3. But in order to actually enforce capital offenses or corporal punishment, you have to have at a minimum a court of 23. And you'll notice that it's an odd number in the Torah law. In American law, it's 12, a jury is 12 people. A jury is 12, and it has to be in a unanimous jury. They have to be unanimous in order to sentence somebody to whatever the sentence, otherwise it's called a hung jury. And they have to deliberate until all 12 agree. In halacha, it's not like that. You only need a majority of the judges. That's why it's always an odd number. It's 71, 23, 3. That's a system of judges, number one. Number two, every city had courts. So you look at the legal system today in the United States. If you want to go to court, you're not going to wait 2-3 years to go to court. There's always a backlog. And in Torah, it didn't work that way. In Torah, you went to the court, and the case was judged within 2 days maximum. 2 days. Yeah, the guy was accused. 2 witnesses accused the guy of a crime. They brought him to court, and the judges deliberated. They heard the testimony from the witnesses. Any other witnesses who were there, they deliberated, and they sentenced him. And they sentenced him. The court's delivery. You talk about legal experts, people who cannot be grafted, people who cannot be bribed, people who cannot be corrupted. And they deliberated, and within 2 days, the case went that way. Next. And there was no backlog. Now, the argument, the counter argument is, yeah, but then maybe the court's going to judge incorrectly. Yeah, but no system is 100% perfect. Then you got to choose which system seems to be a better system for the functioning of a society. And in our society today, you got to, what do you call it? You can sit there, what do they call it? One of the cops who just got sentenced, the guys who, they killed the guy in Minnesota, in Minneapolis. What was his name? Floyd. Derek Chauvin. Well, he got sentenced a while ago. Now they got the other guy, Chung. I think his name is Chung, something like that. He's already served over a year, and he's been over a year in prison before waiting for this case to come to court. So in America, okay, say once they sentence him, so that counts against the what do you call it? But the Torah, number one, is very practically. The first thing it says that in all your gates, that means in all of your cities, you have to have a court. You have to be able to run law and order. So society has to function, number one. That's the basic idea here. Now, here the commentaries say that this is referring to every individual. Shoftim v'shoftim, judges and enforcers, titen lecha, you should give for yourself, b'chol she'orecha, in all your gates. According to the Kabbalistic masters, we have 5 gates. The 5 gates are our 5 senses. And the senses are what connect us to the physical material world. And therefore, we have to have judges and enforcers for our senses. That means that, number one, we have to judge whether or not any particular action is appropriate. According to other Kabbalists, it's 7 gates that we have, whatever it is. Whatever it is, it's our connection to the world. The sensory connection that we have. And do you know that Kabbalistically the eyes are called the window to the soul? Isn't that interesting? The eyes are the window to the soul. And even more than that, the eyes are said to be the holiest part, the most spiritual part of the body, because there's an inverse connection between spirituality and physicality. The more physical, for instance, our neshama, we have a soul. The soul does not want to be in the physical world. The soul has to be encased in a body in order to be able to exist in the physical world. The more something is spiritual, the less tolerance it has for the physical. And what's remarkable is that if I would put an eyelash on your arm, or on your tongue, or in your ear, it wouldn't bother you so much. If I put an eyelash, which is physical, in your eye, you could go nuts, go berserk. It's one of those social things where there's like almost a universally agreed that if somebody has something in their eye, you're allowed to ask even a stranger, do I have something in my eye? You're allowed to check. That's just one of those things. It's like bumming a cigarette off somebody. It's just universally agreed. That's something you're allowed to do, right? Hey, can you check my eye? Because everybody can relate to that. And if you put a contact lens, a lot of people can't get used to contact lenses. Nobody had trouble getting used to a shirt. Right? Ooh, I can't take shirts. Nobody with a broken arm ever had trouble with a cast. Unless it's too tight. But a contact lens, you walk around all day blinking like that. You're always looking in a mirror to see if it's. Why? The eye. What's remarkable is not only the eye, the face. What's the Hebrew word? Do you know what the Hebrew word for face is? Panim. What does panim mean? What does pinim mean? Lifnim. It means the interior. The ministry of the interior is Misrat HaPnim. Isn't that remarkable? The most exposed external part of ourselves is called the inside. You ever think about that? Isn't that interesting? Why is that? The answer is because you look at a person's face, you could often, not always, but you could often look at a person's face and you could give a projection of what's going on inside a person. I'm sure there are certain people in your life that you have met, and at first glance, your first thought has been, no matter what happens, I will not lend this person money. Just by taking one look at the guy, he's got a sneaky look to him. And we make judgments like that all the time. You look at this person looks very spiritual. This person looks drunk. And what I find even more remarkable is infants, a baby, a month old, 2 months old. Once they can start seeing, apparently they can't. Their eyesight isn't developed for a couple of weeks. Their eyesight isn't developed. I don't know. That's what the books say. I don't know. The infants they never did a survey. But that's what they claim. But at 2 months old, 3 months old, they make eye contact with you. When you look at a kid, why does the kid look straight at your eyes? Why does he look at your nose? Why does he look at your chin? They look at your eyes. I do that with my grandchildren all the time. Just stare at them. And the kid looks at your eyes. That means that we have these senses. So the Torah says, Shoftim, you have to make judges. Judge the action, whether it's the appropriate action or not. But then, Shotrim, then we have to have the enforcers. We have to muster up the willpower in order to do or refrain from doing that which we should or shouldn't be doing more. It says, Titen lecha. Let's go back to the plane. Now, they talk about a judges. Okay, let's talk about a judge. So a judge in Chicago, where an honest cop or an honest judge, the definition of an honest judge in Chicago was that after you bribed him, he stayed bought. That was the definition of an honest judge. I remember when I was a little kid, I was intrigued by this. I was a little kid, I was about 11 years old. The Attorney General of Illinois, a man named Powell, the Attorney General of Illinois.
Still in power.
Powell, this is Powell. There's another Powell now?
Yeah.
Oh, no kidding. But this Powell, and I was a little kid. I was an impressionable little kid. He was 11. I was 11 years old. We're talking about a long time ago. He died, and they found shoe boxes in his house stuffed with $900,000 cash. $900,000 back then. Just add a zero, gentlemen. And he had these shoe boxes, and I was intrigued by the idea. And I remember my dad was talking to one of his friends about, the obvious corruption here. And I said, what's wrong with you saving money in shoe boxes? I got $900,000 cash in shoe boxes. That's the Attorney General of the state of Illinois. This is the guy who's supposed to be enforcing law and order. So the Torah says, Titen lecha, you, the judge. Make sure that you, the judge, are honest and above board before you go judging other people. So I saw an interesting story. There's a guy, they accuse a guy of robbing. So one of these, back in the day, in one of these Muslim countries, they catch a guy, they accuse him of robbing. They caught him robbing, and they sentence him to death. So before the guy dies, he says to the king, Excellency, listen, I'm guilty. I admit I'm guilty. But just one thing, I happen to know a secret where you could plant trees and they'll grow and produce fruit in 10 minutes. No kidding. He says, so, it might be in your best interest to, so the king says, okay, well, what's the secret? He says, okay, I need a certain amount of apple seeds, and I need some cinnamon, and I need some olive oil, I need the whole, he mixes the whole thing together. And he says, okay, now I'm going to plant this, and this is going to be planted, and the apples are going to sprout in 10 minutes. There's only one thing. It only works if someone who has never stolen is the guy who plants it. So I'm disqualified because I have stolen. So maybe let's take the minister of your treasury minister, let him plant it. Treasury minister says, well, no, I can't, there have been a couple of times where, so he says, okay, so we'll take the minister of transportation or whatever it is. And he got, well, listen, so eventually they said, well, how about the king? Let the king plant it. And the king said, well, I do remember a time when I was a kid, I shoplifted. So, the king is that. So the judge, Robert said, I understand. So why are you actually, none of you are willing to play. You're all guilty. So why are you executing me for stealing? You also stole. That means that I don't know how the story ended. I don't know if they just said, okay, wise guy, we're killing you anyway. I don't know what the end of the story was. But at the end of the day, you have to be completely, what do you call it? And that's why the next pasuk says, look at the very next pasuk. Lo sate mishpat, don't distort the judgment. Third line. Lo sakir panim, don't play favorites. Velo sikach shochad, don't take bribes. Ki ha-shochad ye'aver einei chachamim v'salif divrei tzadikim. Bribes, what do you call it? Bribes distort a person's judgment. And the reason that a bribe distorts a person's judgment is that when you take a bribe, it creates a bias. because you actually make a connection with the person. What do you call it? The word shochad, if you look at the word shochad in the third line, the word shochad, the root of the word chad, it comes from the word echad. You become one with the person who has given you the bribe. And it's once you've been bribed, once you've been greased, so it's very difficult for a person. Now, from a halachic point of view, it's anybody who's an official in an official position, you're not allowed to bribe them. You're not allowed to bribe people. You can't bribe a cop. I had a friend who once got stopped on the outer drive in Chicago. Cop said, "I'm going to have to give you a ticket." He said, "Can I pay part of it in advance?" So he said, "Yeah, all right, how much?" He said, "Whatever it's worth to you." And so he said, because of course the cop took $20 and that was it, let him go. So yeah, well, Chicago. Hey, listen, it goes on all over the place. It goes on all over the world. But at the end of the day, if he's in an official position, you're not allowed to bribe him. I had another friend who had a big kosher salami in his car. He was a butcher. He's got a kosher salami. Cop stopped him. He said, "Hey, you wanna?" Give him the ticket. He said, "Hey, you want a salami?" He says, "Hey, heck yeah!" So he drove into a side street and he gave him a salami. Let him off. I'm sure the cop was happy. Came home. It was a good day's work. Come home, have some kosher salami sandwiches, right? So according to halacha, you can't do that. The only time you'd be able to bribe somebody is if you're in a country, let's say Mexico, or some South American country, where the only way you could get a fair trial is by bribing the judge, because you can be sure the other guy bribed him. Or if it's an anti-Semitic country where the Jew, in order just to get an even shake, you have to bribe the judge, because he's certainly going to be more biased in the other direction. So that the halacha says you're allowed to do if you're in that situation. The best is not to end up in front of a judge, obviously. But if in general, bribing is not allowed. You can't bribe people for favors. That's what the Torah says. But human nature is that when you take a bribe, you can't stay objective once you've taken the bribe. The bribe does something to you. And not only that, you'll notice that the Torah says it blinds the eyes of the wise. So here, a guy who has eye trouble pays to go to a doctor to get his eyes cured. Here, a guy is actually harming himself, both spiritually, his spiritual vision and his physical vision is affected, because he's willing to take the bribes. Now, part of the idea here is that when it says Shoftim v'shotrim titen lecha b'chol she'orecha, the whole idea of judges and the whole idea of supervision, people ask all the time, well, if we have judges and you have courts who are enforcing, they have the right even on things that are not monetary. Let's say there's a Jew in the community keeps eating non-kosher food. The judge, the court has the authority to get him in line, right? What is this? It's halacha is not optional. So people ask all the time, yeah, but it takes away our free choice, doesn't it? It takes our free choice, and then why we're supposed to be serving God. The answer is every single human being needs accountability. We all need accountability. That's part of the benefit of having a family. You have a wife and you have children. There's accountability. You've got responsibility. Somebody's watching you. It keeps your behavior. You have to behave a certain way. I don't want my kids to see me doing certain things or hear me saying certain things or behaving a certain way. And you have a responsibility. You have an accountability to a wife, believe it or not. People think, well, the wife she's henpecking her husband. She's not henpecking her husband. Every man has to be accountable to somebody. You have to be accountable to a boss. You have to be accountable to somebody. People who are not accountable you end up very, very disconcerted when you're not accountable. You need a responsibility. Everybody needs some sort of structure. That's why a lot of times people on vacation, people get a little depressed on vacation. You work and you get up, you have your routine, you go to work, you get up, you go to work, then all of a sudden you have vacation. The first day of vacation is great. You sleep late, you read the paper, we eat a donut, here we go. And then finally, by the second or third day of vacation, you're already, well, what am I going to do now? So unless you have concrete plans, so when there's discretionary time and you have no responsibility, no structure, so a person gets kind of, you get kind of itchy. What am I supposed to do with my free time now? So some people could spend their free time with entertainment. If you've got a lot of money and you like gambling, so you can stay in a casino for the rest of your life. But most people don't have that. Most people don't have it. But you have to have, the Torah says, Shoftim. We have to have accountability. There's got to be accountability in life. It's not hefker. It's not a free-for-all. And the ultimate example of that, does anybody know who's the ultimate example of this concept? The first snake, the serpent. What was the curse?
No more legs.
Was that no more legs is part of it? But in the Torah, you're going to crawl on your belly,
You won't be able to speak.
and you're going to eat dirt. You're going to eat dirt. Now, snakes don't eat dirt. That means that they eat the rodents that grow in the dirt. Some say they lick dirt, but they certainly have, and their food is available everywhere they go. Now, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? Their food is available everywhere. What could be wrong with that? The answer, A, it could be gluttonous. That's true, but even more than that, you haven't got any accountability. It's the father. I heard a story like this. There was a guy who, parents were, the wife died. My father had a 17-year-old son, and he remarried. And the new wife was not interested in having him in the house. Father was well-to-do. So he gave the kid his credit card. He said, go rent an apartment, any cost you want. Go get yourself a car, get yourself food, get anything you want. You just can't be in the house. The kid ended up by a psychologist. He was suicidal. Why? I mean, what's 17-year-old? 17-year-old's dream. I mean, give me the credit card, what could be better? The answer is because he's got no structure, no accountability, no nothing. He wants a connection with his father. The snake is told by God, I don't want to see you. Take the money, just go. I don't want to hear about it. Just go. That's the ultimate punishment. You're on your own. You're on your own. It looks very tempting. It looks like the most tempting thing in the world, delectable. And at the end of the day, what do you call it? They talk about these celebrities, the athletes. Who do they end up marrying? These athletes. All these celebrities, athletes. I don't say how long they stay married, but who do they end up marrying? They don't marry the groupies. They don't marry the fans who are crazy. They always marry the girl who called them out on something. Because they themselves sense they need somebody that they're accountable to. You need somebody that you're answerable to. That's what the Torah is telling you over here. The Torah is telling you over here, Shoftim and Shoftim. Okay. Take a look at the second pasuk in pasuk Gimel, third pasuk. Tzedek tirdof, chase after justice. Pursue justice. So the commentaries say you have to pursue justice through just means. Tzedek, justice. Tzedek tirdof. You have to pursue it with just means. That means the means. How's it go? The means don't justify the ends. The ends don't justify the means. Right. That means a judge in court can't pull shtick if it's not honest. He's got to judge honestly. And not only that, a judge, even with the best intentions, let's say you have a very wealthy man and a poor man come to court. So the judge may feel, listen, a little bit of the Jewish version of Robin Hood. In this case, it's what we call it Ruvain Hood, right? The judge would come to court, and the judge is going to say, listen, he's a poor man. You know what? I'm going to rule against the rich man, and I'll give to the poor man because, after all, he needs the money. He's not allowed to do that. The alternative, this is a wealthy, upstanding citizen and his dignity. I'm going to rule against the poor man. Then afterwards, I'll reimburse him. But he really won the case. But I can't insult the rich man in public. He'll be insulted. Says the Torah, you're not allowed to do that. So what did Dovid HaMelech do? He judged it fairly. And if the poor man was guilty, so then Dovid HaMelech would then reimburse the poor man. He had a rule against the poor man because the poor man was guilty. Then the poor man would pay. And then Dovid HaMelech would reimburse him from his own pocket. That you're allowed to do because you judged honestly. So the Torah comes along and the Torah says when you enforce justice, when you're a judge and you're pursuing justice, make sure you pursue justice with the just means. Robin Hood doesn't cut it in Judaism. Robin, you can't rob from the rich and give to the poor. And Dennis Moore also doesn't work. You know what Dennis Moore was? Dennis Moore was the Monty Python character. You ever see Monty Python? Dennis Moore, riding through the night. Dennis Moore was the guy who robbed from the poor and gave to the rich. That was Monty Python. Dennis Moore also doesn't make it. So what do you call it? You can't, in Judaism, it's got to be straight. The ends don't justify the means. That's the rule. That applies in all areas of Judaism. That applies in all areas. Everything we do has to be according to the way that Hashem wants us to do it. Okay, now I want to show you a fascinating idea that is out of context. First of all, the Torah says like this: Lo sita locha ashera kol eitz eitzel mizbach Hashem lokecha asher tasach. You're not allowed to plant trees by the altar. And then the Torah says, V'lo sokim lecha matzeva. Do not make, how does the art school translate it? A pillar. Asher sonei Hashem elokecha. A pillar is an altar made of one stone. For Jews, an altar has to be made of stones that are joined together. You build an altar out of numerous stones, not a one stone, what's called a matzeva, a one stone pillar. If you're going to sacrifice, you're going to bring a sacrifice, an offering to God, what's the difference if it's one stone or if it's a combination of stones? What's really the difference? What's wrong with one stone versus what's the difference between a mizbeach, an altar, and a one stone? So there are a number of differences. Nobody got an idea here? What's the difference between a pillar, one stone, and a mizbeach? First of all, a one stone.
A lot more effort goes into making
the altar with many stones.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a lot. Good. It could be the effort. What else? A mizbeach represents unity. A one stone altar means I'm a lone ranger. I'm doing my own thing. I'll serve God, but I'm not really a member of the community. A mizbeach means that there are more stones. You take these stones and you put more stones together. And not only that, not only you can put more stones together, you could always add stones. That means if an altar, devotion, sacrifices represent some sort of connection with God, so the goal of life is to grow. It's to continue growing. What's a matzeva? A matzeva is a one stone pillar. That's it. It is what it is. There's no more room for growth because it's a one stone pillar. Do you know what they put on a grave? What do they put on a grave? Put a tombstone on a grave. Right? What's a tombstone? It's called a matzeva. It's called one stone. A tomb is made of one stone. Why? Because the guy down there, he's finished growing. The guy who's died, he's finished growing. His life, he's completed his job. He's done. He's finished. He's no longer in the growth mode. Whereas a person, an altar represents the number of stones that are put together. That a person always has to focus on. That's why somebody once said, it's a good idea to think about what you want to have written on your tombstone. Because they only write things on your tombstone if you actually live that way. What would you like to have to say? What would you like to have them say at your eulogy? What things would I like the person should think? What would you like to say about him when he dies? What should people say? Oh, he was so generous, was he? Oh, he was so kind, was he? They're not going to say it if he wasn't. They may say other things, but they're not going to say that, right? And what's remarkable is they never say, I don't think they say, even at an Irishman who dies, nobody says, wow, old Jake, wow, he could really put down a six-pack. And I say, oh, he really liked cars. Right? Why is it that even at the people who are most farthest, they talk about, oh yeah, I saw him hold a door open once for an old lady, and yet I saw him give a couple of bucks to a guy on the street. Why are they talking about things like that? Why do they talk about how he lived? Yeah, boy, could he put down hot dogs. Boy, he was hot dogs with some, what do you call it? Boy, he was really into that. And wash it down with some scotch. Oh, that was his thing. Why don't they talk about that? The answer is because when you're in front of a gaping hole, and they're putting them, then everybody relates to the reality of life. What's life really about? While you're living, all right, okay, we'll go do this, go do that, go have some fun. Nobody says, wow, boy, this guy could really, he was really something at the craps table. Nobody talks like that. Nobody talks like that when a guy dies. Why not? The answer is because they had a guy in Israel, a guy died a guy in a kibbutz. So in the local area, he was known, he was the baker on one of the kibbutzim, and he had this unbelievable recipe for an apple cinnamon cake. So on his tombstone, he had them write the recipe for his apple cinnamon. So people would come to visit the tombstone, come to visit the grave, and they'd be standing there. What is that? A ground of 2 pinches of salt, like that. That's what you want to be remembered. That's what you want to. So Torah is saying, don't. What do you call it? Number one. There's the matzeva is a symbol of growth. An altar is a symbol of growth. Number one. Number two, one of the commentaries says, and that's what you'll find is very true. Don't turn yourself into a pillar. Don't turn yourself into a pillar that can't move. That means, haven't you ever met anybody, maybe ourselves, we all have a part, this is how I am and this is my policy. Did you ever hear that idea? We have a policy. Our policy is we don't answer the door during dinner. We have a policy. We don't answer the door during dinner. Well, maybe somebody's knocking on the door because maybe they need charity. Or maybe who made that policy? They had a guy once, he's sitting and eating dinner with his family. So there's a knock on the door, some guy comes around, one of these Jewish collectors, he's collecting for some worthy cause. The guy knocks on the door, the father gets up and invites the guy in. He goes into his room, he sits with the guy for 15 minutes, writes him out a nice generous check, and the guy leaves. So his wife says to him, Chaim, you were in the middle of eating, why did you get up? Why'd you do that? He says, listen, I know of a halacha that says you're not allowed to make an interruption when you're saying Shema. In the middle of Shema, you're not allowed to talk, you're not allowed to interrupt. And I know a halacha that when you're davening the Amidah, the Shemon Esrei, you're not allowed to make any interruptions. I don't know of any halacha that says you're not allowed to interrupt your supper to help a Jew in need. I never heard such a halacha. So people, sometimes people say, well, this is our policy. Well, maybe your policy should be reviewed. Person said, well, this is just the way I am. I think it was Paul Newman. Do you ever hear Paul Newman, the actor?
Of course.
I don't know. I don't know how old you guys are. I don't know if you guys even heard of Michael Jordan. So I don't know if what you've heard of what you haven't. But Paul Newman, he didn't sign autographs. I read once in Reader's Digest, so it must be true. The better than Ripley's, believe it or not. Paul Newman, he said he had a policy. He didn't sign autographs. When people would ask him for an autograph, he said, no, that's just not something I do. I remember reading it and thinking to myself, well, maybe you should, Paul. After all, these people have made it possible for you to earn a nice living in a very pleasant way. Maybe you should, maybe a guy wants an autograph, maybe you should give him an autograph. What do you mean, it's something I don't do? Well, maybe you should do it. When I was dating my wife, we were going out, I said to her, by the way, I don't do diapers. She said to me, I don't either, now what? I did them. You're going to do them too. Yeah, you can do them. You can do them. I said, I don't do. What do you mean you don't do? Yeah, now you do. I don't do that. Well, maybe you should do it. Okay, everybody's got their limitations. I can't look at the sight of blood. I wouldn't be able, I can't, what do you call it? Okay, everybody's got the things that they're not able to do. You could work you wouldn't be able to work in the reptile house at the zoo. I can't handle reptiles. Okay, everybody's got their shigidlach. But sometimes people determine that, this is something so Torah says, "V'lo sakim lecha matzeva." Don't make yourself into a matzeva, an immovable object. What do you mean you don't do that? Well, maybe you should do that. Maybe that's something that you have to learn that you have to do. And often in family relationships, it's like that. A guy says, no, I don't give compliments. Well, maybe you should. I mean, you don't. Well, maybe you should. Maybe you should review your policy. That's what the Torah is saying. And this is certainly true in character development. Where it says, well, I have anger. I don't, I'm not patient. I'm an impatient person. Well, work on yourself. What do you mean you're an impatient? What, everybody else is just blessed with patience? Everybody else stuck in traffic is just, you're the only guy who wants to shoot everybody on the street? We all do. But you got to work on yourself a little bit. So the Torah is saying, don't turn yourself into a matzeva. Don't turn yourself into an immovable object, an altar. All right. Let's stop here.